The bank manager slid the printout across the table and said, "Ma'am, with a credit score like this, I'm afraid we can't approve the loan." My son was sitting right next to me, and I watched his face fall. That was the moment I found out my own cousin had stolen my identity, opened 4 credit cards in my name, and left me nearly $90,000 in debt. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just smiled and said, "Thank you for letting me know." Because 2 weeks earlier, I had already found the proof. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, hit the like button now. If you've ever stayed silent while someone underestimated you, comment here below. And subscribe to Story Retribution because today's ending proves that karma always arrives, just not when people expect it. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I built my life the hard way. I grew up in a small house with 2 working parents, and I learned early that nothing gets handed to you. I studied accounting, I worked 2 jobs through college, and by the time I turned 32, I had a stable career, a small but paid-off car, and a credit score I was quietly proud of. My husband, Daniel, and I had a 9-year-old son named Mason, and we were saving every spare dollar to buy our first home. We weren't rich. We weren't showing off. We were just steady. And in a family like mine, steady makes you a target. My cousin Ryan was the golden child growing up. Charming, loud, always the center of attention at every holiday. But underneath the charm was someone who never held a job for more than 8 months, who borrowed money he never paid back, and who somehow always had a new excuse ready before anyone could ask a real question. 3 years ago, Ryan lost his apartment. He told the family he was between opportunities and asked if he could stay with us for just a month or 2 while he got back on his feet. Daniel was hesitant. I convinced him. "Family is family," I said. "He's struggling. We have the space." That was my first mistake. Ryan moved into our guest room with 2 suitcases and a laptop bag he never let out of his sight. At first, things seemed fine. He helped around the house, played video games with Mason, told funny stories at dinner. My mother-in-law, Carol, adored him instantly. She kept saying, "See, he's not so bad. You worry too much." I should have worried more. About 4 months in, small things started happening. My mail seemed disturbed sometimes. A bank statement I was expecting never arrived. When I asked the post office, they said it had been delivered. I brushed it off as a mix-up. Then 6 months in, I noticed something stranger. My credit monitoring app sent an alert. A new account had been opened in my name. I called the bank immediately, panicked, thinking it was some anonymous hacker. The representative asked a routine question. "Do you recognize this address as an alternate mailing address on file?" It was our home address. Whoever did this had access to my mail. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself maybe it was a coincidence, maybe someone had stolen my information online. I closed that one account, filed a fraud alert, and didn't think too hard about who was living in my guest room. That was my second mistake. I wanted so badly to believe family wouldn't do that to me. 2 months later, another alert came. Then another. 4 accounts total, opened over the span of nearly a year, all traced back to addresses connected to our house. By the time I discovered the full extent, the combined balance across all 4 cards was $87,000. $87,000 of debt under my name. My name, not Ryan's. I remember sitting in my car in a parking lot after leaving the bank that day, staring at the printed statements, feeling my hands shake for the first time in years. Daniel asked what was wrong when I got home, and I almost told him everything right there. But something stopped me. If I confronted Ryan directly with no real proof beyond suspicion, he would deny it. He was good at denying things. He had denied borrowing money he clearly borrowed. He had denied breaking things he clearly broke. He would smile, look hurt, and say, "You're accusing me of this? After everything I've done for this family?" I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof so solid that even his charm couldn't talk his way around it. So I stayed calm. I stayed quiet. And I started collecting everything. I requested official fraud reports from every financial institution involved. I gathered certified bank statements showing the account openings, the transaction dates, and the mailing addresses used. I pulled phone records showing verification calls made from a number registered to Ryan. I filed a formal identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission, which gave me an official case number and documentation trail. Piece by piece, I built a file, not out of anger, out of necessity. I kept everything in a locked drawer in my home office, a drawer only Daniel and I had the key to. Every fraud report went in a labeled folder. Every bank statement was highlighted, dates circled, amounts underlined. I made copies of everything and stored digital versions in a separate cloud account Ryan had no access to, one with a password even Daniel didn't know at first, because I wasn't taking any chances. There were nights I lay awake replaying every dinner, every holiday, every time Ryan had made a joke at someone else's expense and gotten away with it because he was just being funny. I thought about the time he mocked my cousin's stutter until she stopped coming to family events. I thought about the time he told my aunt her cooking wasn't what it used to be in front of 15 people. Nobody ever challenged him because Carol always stepped in to smooth things over, and because confronting him meant confronting the golden child, everyone had decided not to see clearly. I realized that this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about a pattern nobody had ever been willing to break. And I understood that if I didn't handle this carefully, if I let emotion lead instead of evidence, I would become just another person Ryan had talked circles around. So I kept building the file. I called the FTC Identity Theft Hotline twice to make sure my report was fully processed. I contacted each bank's fraud department individually, requesting written confirmation of the account opening dates and the verification addresses used. Every document told the same story in the same handwriting of dates and numbers. Our house, during the exact months Ryan lived under our roof, using information only someone with access to my mail and personal documents could have obtained. Then, one evening, everything I needed fell directly into my lap. Mason had asked to borrow Ryan's old tablet to watch a show while I made dinner. Ryan wasn't home. He was out with a friend named Corey, someone he'd known since high school, someone who visited the house occasionally and always seemed uncomfortable around me, like he knew something he wasn't supposed to know. The tablet was logged into Ryan's cloud backup. A video had auto-synced from his phone just hours earlier. Mason, being a curious 9-year-old, tapped on it thinking it might be a game clip. It wasn't a game clip. It was Ryan, sitting in Corey's car, laughing about something. I only glanced at it because Mason called out, "Mom, why is Uncle Ryan talking about credit cards?" My stomach dropped. I sat down next to Mason and watched the full thing. In the video, Ryan was mid-conversation, clearly relaxed, clearly unaware anyone but Corey would ever see this. He said, "Bro, it's not even hard. I used her information, her social, everything. She never even checks her mail that closely. 4 cards, and she still doesn't know." Corey laughed and asked, "You're not scared she'll find out?" Ryan said, "Who's gonna suspect me? I live in her house. She thinks I'm broke and grateful. She has no idea." I felt Mason's small hand grip my arm. He looked up at me and asked, "Mom, is Uncle Ryan talking about you?" I told him, "Yes, sweetheart, but Mommy is going to handle it. Stay calm for me, okay?" That night, after Mason went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with Daniel and told him everything. The fraud reports, the bank statements, the FTC case number, and now, a recorded confession. Daniel's jaw tightened in a way I'd rarely seen. He wanted to confront Ryan immediately, right there in the house, that same night. I asked him not to. If we do it quietly, in private, he'll cry, apologize, promise to pay it back, and Carol will convince everyone to forgive him because family forgives. I don't want an apology. I want the truth out where he can't hide from it. I want everyone to see exactly who he is. Daniel asked what I had in mind. I told him. The family reunion. 3 weeks away. Every relative in one place. Carol's backyard, the same yard where Ryan had humiliated smaller people for years with his jokes and comments, thinking no one would ever push back. I wanted him to humiliate me first, publicly, in front of everyone, because then, and only then, would my response feel like justice instead of an accusation. So I waited. 3 weeks of sitting across the dinner table from the man who had stolen from me, smiling politely, passing the salt, listening to him make jokes about when I finally get my life together. 3 weeks of Carol praising him for helping around the house, while wearing clothes bought with money stolen from me. It took everything I had to stay calm. But I had learned long ago that the loudest reaction rarely wins. The quiet, prepared one does. The day of the family reunion arrived. Carol's backyard was full. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, the usual spread of grilled food and lawn chairs. Ryan arrived looking confident as always, greeting people with hugs and jokes, playing the role of the beloved cousin who was getting back on his feet. Midway through the afternoon, conversation turned, as it always eventually does at these gatherings, to money and home ownership. My Uncle Frank mentioned that Daniel and I had been looking at houses. Ryan, sitting across the picnic table with a plate of ribs, smirked and said loud enough for half the yard to hear, "Good luck with that loan. Actually, has anyone told you guys about credit scores? You gotta be careful. Not everyone qualifies, you know." A few relatives chuckled awkwardly, unsure what he meant. He continued, enjoying the attention. I heard from someone at the bank, not naming names, that certain people's credit isn't as clean as they think. Bad history, missed payments, debt piling up. Real shame when you think you're financially responsible and you're actually a mess. Carol laughed and said, "Ryan, don't be dramatic." But he wasn't done. He looked directly at me and said, "I'm just saying, some people act like they've got it all together, but their credit report tells a very different story. Maybe you should double-check before you embarrass yourselves applying for a mortgage." The backyard went quiet. A few relatives glanced at me, waiting to see how I'd react. This was the humiliation. This was exactly the moment I had been waiting for. I set my drink down slowly. I didn't raise my voice. "You're right, Ryan. My credit history has changed a lot this past year. Would you like to know why?" He shrugged, still smug. "Not my business." "Actually," I said, reaching into my bag, "it kind of is." I pulled out a folder, not dramatically, just calmly, the way you'd hand someone a menu at dinner. Inside were the printed fraud reports, the bank statements with account opening dates, and the FTC case documentation. I slid it across the table toward him. "Open it." He hesitated, laughing nervously. "What is this?" "Open the envelope." He opened it. I watched his eyes scan the first page. His smile faltered slightly, but he tried to recover. "I don't know what this proves." "Read page 3, I said calmly. Page 3 listed all 4 credit accounts opened under my name, the exact dates, and the mailing address used for verification. Our home address, during the exact months he lived with us. Carol, sitting nearby, leaned over to look. Her face changed instantly. "Ryan, what is this?" he stammered. This could be anyone. Identity theft happens to lots of people. This doesn't prove I did anything." "You're right," I said. "Paper alone doesn't prove intent. That's why I have something else." I pulled out my phone. Daniel, sitting beside me, said quietly, "Go ahead." I pressed play. Ryan's own voice, from the video Mason had accidentally found, filled the backyard. I used her information, her social, everything. She never even checks her mail that closely. 4 cards and she still doesn't know. Someone near the grill said, "Wait, what?" Corey's mother, standing near the fence, turned sharply toward her son with a look of horror, realizing her son had known and said nothing. Ryan's face went pale, actually pale, the color visibly draining. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He looked at Carol, then at Daniel, then back at me, searching for some excuse, some angle, some charm that could talk his way out of a recording of his own voice. That's not what it sounds like," he finally said, his voice cracking. "Tell everyone what it sounds like then," I said. "I'm listening." Silence. Real silence. The kind that swallows an entire backyard full of people. Carol, who had defended him for years, who had told me I worried too much, stood frozen with her hand over her mouth. Finally, she said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Ryan, you lived in her house. You stole from your own cousin while she let you sleep under her roof?" He tried once more. "I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. I didn't think it would get this $90,000, I said quietly. "That's not a mistake. That's not needing time. That's a plan you carried out for almost a year while I fed you, while my son called you Uncle Ryan, while I defended you to people who questioned why a grown man was living off his cousin's kindness." Frank, my uncle, who had chuckled moments earlier at Ryan's joke, now stood up and said, "Ryan, is this true?" Ryan didn't answer. His silence answered for him. Corey, realizing the recording had come from his own car, from his own phone's proximity, tried to quietly back away from the group. But his mother grabbed his arm and said, "You knew about this? You knew and said nothing?" Corey mumbled something about not wanting to get involved, which only made things worse. One by one, family members who had laughed along with Ryan's jokes for years began looking at him differently. The golden child illusion cracked in real time, in front of everyone who had once protected it. Carol, who I expected to defend him no matter what, surprised me. She turned to Ryan and said, "You need to leave my house tonight, and you need to figure out how you're going to pay back every cent of this, or I will personally help her file criminal charges." That was the moment I realized something had shifted permanently. The one person who always shielded him had finally seen him clearly. Ryan looked around the yard, searching for even one supporter, one person willing to make excuses for him the way they always had. No one spoke, no one defended him. The silence was its own verdict. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice or list every grievance I'd been holding onto for a year. I simply closed the folder, picked up my phone, and looked at him one last time. "You spent months trying to convince this family I was the irresponsible one. You should be more careful about which stories you tell, Ryan. Some of them come with proof." I stood up, took Daniel's hand, and we walked to where Mason was sitting with his grandmother, quietly watching everything unfold with wide, careful eyes. I knelt down and told him it was okay, that grown-ups sometimes make very bad choices, and that telling the truth, even when it's hard, is always the right thing to do. He nodded, still processing it all. But I could see relief in his small shoulders, like a weight had lifted that he hadn't even fully understood he was carrying. We didn't stay much longer after that. There was no need to watch the aftermath play out. Ryan could deal with the consequences of a year of decisions in one single afternoon. In the weeks that followed, the full truth continued to unravel. With the FTC report and fraud documentation already filed, the banks moved quickly once law enforcement got involved. Ryan was formally charged with identity theft and financial fraud. Facing actual legal consequences, he suddenly found the money he claimed he never had to begin paying restitution. Every excuse he'd made for months about being broke evaporated the moment jail time became a real possibility. Carol, to her credit, didn't try to soften what happened, or ask me to let it go for the family's sake. She helped where she could, providing a written statement confirming the timeline of when Ryan lived in our home. It didn't erase what happened, but it meant something that the one person who always defended him chose truth over comfort when it mattered most. Corey eventually admitted, under pressure from his own mother, that he'd known for months and said nothing. Their relationship was never quite the same after that. Trust, once broken by silence, doesn't rebuild easily. As for us, the fraudulent accounts were eventually cleared from my credit report after months of dispute paperwork and legal documentation. It took time, patience, and more phone calls than I can count, but the truth was on my side, and the truth held up. We got our home loan approved 8 months later. Nothing extravagant. Just a modest house with a small backyard where Mason could finally have space to run around. A place that was entirely, undeniably, ours. Family gatherings after that were smaller, quieter, more honest. Some relatives who had laughed along with Ryan's jokes over the years grew noticeably more careful about who they defended without asking real questions. A few reached out privately to apologize for not seeing what was happening sooner. I didn't need the apologies. I just needed my name back, and I got it. Sometimes people ask me if I regret staying calm for so long, if I regret not confronting him the moment I found that first fraud alert. I don't. Because if I had reacted with anger and no evidence, he would have turned it around, made me look paranoid, made the family doubt me instead of him. Patience wasn't weakness. It was the only way the truth could stand on its own, undeniable, in front of everyone who needed to see it. The last time I saw Ryan was at a courthouse hallway, months after the reunion. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of the charm that used to fill every room he entered. He tried to catch my eye, maybe hoping for some flicker of the family bond we used to have. I didn't look away in anger. I didn't look away in triumph either. I simply looked at him the way you look at a stranger, and then I walked past him toward the courtroom doors, toward my husband, toward the life I had quietly, patiently, rebuilt one piece of paper at a time. Some people think revenge has to be loud to be satisfying. It doesn't. The quietest justice is often the most permanent, because it isn't built on anger. It's built on truth, patience, and the simple, undeniable proof that eventually every hidden thing comes into the light. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button right now. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my situation? If you enjoy stories about